we'll be talking further about during the webinar. During today's webinar, we'll be covering how to connect to your consumer with the verified information they're looking for, what the role government can play in building a strong economy, and how you can show your economic impact no matter where your product is sold. We have a panel of experts today. First up will be Bill Brunelle, who's the co-founder of Independent We Stand, which started as a cause marketing program for manufacturers still, and also has become a very powerful buy local organization. We'll also have Dr. Martin Cantor on, who serves as a Suffolk County Economic Development Commissioner, and he'll talk about city planning and government development and helping small business and large business. And we'll also have the CEO and founder of the Economic Information Exchange Company, Anthony Comito, and also the inventor and patent holder for the Economic Impact Rating platform. The reason that we're putting the webinar on today is to talk about problems that are happening in the marketplace, especially around Made in USA claims that have become diluted with the lack of third-party verifications and misuse of product labeling. Consumers want to buy local, and Main Street USA has been trying to come back from being a ghost town. And city governments are looking for ways to develop local economies, match incentives, and help businesses, especially independent businesses, thrive. What's behind the label? As I mentioned a minute ago, there are a lot of labels that claim Made in USA. In fact, 83% of Americans want to buy Made in USA products, according to a recent survey from the Gallup Company. But unfortunately, Made in USA claims have become diluted because there is a lack of third-party verification, and a lot of people are just slapping the Made in USA label on and not keeping up with the standards the FTC has outlined. In July of this year, the FTC investigated one such organization that supplied a Made in USA label and charged a fee to manufacturers to self-verify their claim and allowed them to put this label on their products. The federal regulators found that those labels were deceptive and used to boost businesses. The FTC also made a statement about these seals on products, saying that they can be very helpful when consumers purchase products because they are looking for Made in USA claims. But when the marketers provide seals without verification, and it tells the consumer that they are for real, but actually they're being deceived, and the value of all marketers' seals are diminished. We all know that buying local boosts the economy no matter where you are on the planet. And if you buy local, more money stays in your community and helps them be more self-sustaining. But how much more can be produced locally? Again, buy local campaigns alert a community about gaps in the local business marketplace and encourage them to produce products that are in high demand. So if consumers can see that something is a need, they can either develop it themselves or companies can be brought in to provide those products. Consumers who support their local mainstream street retailer also help more than double the money in their community. And we're going to find out more about this movement from our next panelist, which is Bill Brunelle from Independent We Stand. Bill?
Thanks. Very glad to be a part of this webinar. Buying local is a passion for me, and what I thought I'd do is start out by telling you a little bit about our sponsor and why they got into the whole buy local movement. Steel is the #1 manufacturer of handheld outdoor power equipment in the U.S. And what a lot of folks don't know is they did that not by selling their products through the big boxes and mega retailers. Instead, they chose to work with 8,500 independent servicing dealers across the country. These are mom-and-pop hardware stores, garden centers, and power equipment stores. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but whenever a product or manufacturer works with a big box or mega chains, those folks often squeeze the manufacturer to the point where they've got to really look at the quality of the product, and sometimes that can go downhill. Sometimes factories are closed and jobs are shipped overseas, and Steel didn't want anything to do with that. Steel products are considered the best in the industry, and they wanted to protect the brand, so that's why they work with these folks to this day. As you can imagine, that really set the business world on fire when they first became #1 a few years back, because every business school in the country would teach students started in manufacturing that the best way to succeed is to sell your products to these big boxes and hardware stores, and big boxes and mega retailers, and Steel proved them wrong. Steel's goal with Independent We Stand was to establish their brand and, more importantly, their dealers as champions of independent businesses in America. And what was really interesting at the very beginning, Steel kept a low profile. This was a cause marketing campaign for sure for Steel and their Steel dealers, but they didn't want it to be about them. They wanted it to be about those independent businesses that return more money to local communities and are better for local economies. When they kicked off the program in the fall of 2010, the first thing we wanted to do was build a strong database that consumers could use to find and support locally owned businesses. So we imported 7,000 Steel dealers from coast to coast. Again, that's now up to 8,500 plus. And it just took off from there. We really wanted to build a powerful database, and we suddenly started getting contacted by bookstores and local record shops and local coffee shops and tattoo parlors and everything in between. And it's now grown to almost 120,000 participating businesses. In addition, other manufacturers have taken notice, and last year we formed partnerships with DeVoe Paint, which is a paint brand produced by PPG Industries and has been produced in the U.S. since 1754, and the Chrysler Group in their commercial vehicle division. Next slide, please. So why should folks buy into the whole buy local movement? Well, as Stephanie had mentioned earlier, a large percentage of the money that you spend at a local-owned business is recirculated in the local economy. And that's really taken off. There are now over 160 plus local buy local groups in the country. These are formal local buy local groups. There are also informal Facebook pages, Twitter accounts, just regular folks that want to support their local businesses. And again, it's really taking off. What you're also seeing is a lot more associations and buying groups on a national level. For example, there's the American Booksellers Association, which has about 1,600 independent bookstores. There's one for running stores. There's one for fabric shops. There's one for pharmacies. It's really growing. These folks are beginning to understand that the localization movement can really affect the bottom line. And speaking of the bottom line, some of the research that Stephanie shared earlier talked about the money that's returned to the local community. But small businesses are all about the bottom line. These guys work 12, 14-hour days, 7 days a week, and it really has to impact the bottom line before it's really worth it. So we partnered with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance in January and interviewed about 3,000 business owners and found that they saw for businesses in a community with an active buy local campaign, they saw a 7% increase in sales in 2013 versus 2.3% for independent businesses in communities without such a buy local initiative. Those businesses also reported 75% increase in customer traffic and other benefits to the business. But what really stands out is the number of consumers that shopped last year on Small Business Saturday. If you're not familiar with Small Business Saturday, it's an American Express open cause marketing campaign that takes place on the Saturday after Black Friday. Everybody knows Black Friday is huge for retailers, and this falls just the day after. And they projected that 100 million consumers shopped small on Small Business Saturday last year and spent an estimated $5.3 billion. I think that proves that consumers are willing to shop small and seek out those independent businesses. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about Independent We Stand and Buy Local support. The localization movement is really taking off on social media. People feel good about supporting their local bookstore, their local hardware store, and they love to share that fact on social platforms. So that's a huge part of our marketing plan, and we have a presence on Facebook, Google+, LinkedIn, Pinterest, YouTube, and more. In addition, this past spring, we introduced a free mobile app that's available both on the App Store for iPhone as well as Google Play for Android. And it's an extremely powerful way for shoppers who are out on the go to find and support locally owned businesses, and I would encourage you to seek it out, download, and use it. Businesses that want to be a part of the Independent We Stand movement can join for free. They actually go through a vetting process, so we make sure that they are indeed locally owned. And then once they sign up, we have a ton of free materials that they can download, including market materials, point of sale, social media, even some public relations. We have PowerPoint presentations that these businesses can give to other small business groups, especially chambers and small business development communities, and other tools like for example, how to create an editorial post that you can put in your local newspaper that talks about the advantages of buying local. We also have a helpline that businesses can call to get assistance. And really our goal is to inspire these locally owned businesses to discover and use their locally owned status to get in front of these consumers that are hungry to buy local. As was mentioned earlier, the membership has substantially grown since the initial kickoff, and we continue to fine-tune and develop additional programs to support consumers and businesses alike. If you would like more information on Independent We Stand, please visit us on the web at independentwestand.org. And again, I would encourage you to find that mobile app, download it, and use it, and support your local businesses.
Thank you, Del. And I do have that app and use it every day. Next up, we'll have Dr. Martin Cantor, who will talk to us about the government side of things. Martin?
Sure. Glad to be here. What we're talking about in terms of the government is that government today is working overtime, trying to find ways to create jobs, and also how do they become more competitive in their particular locality versus other localities which are trying to come in and steal their businesses for economic development. In this particular area, on the Northeast, we find companies from the South where there are lower costs and lower labor costs trying to poach manufacturing businesses. So companies up here, and especially in California, which is losing businesses to Texas, the governments are trying to come up with incentives that will keep businesses there, and also the workforce. The one big part is that the millennials are very mobile, and they move, and they can move where they wish to live and where there are jobs that will pay them the salaries that are aligned with their skill sets and their salary requirements. So lawmakers are trying to find incentives that make sense and are able to spend their very limited dollars and target them to companies that will bring the greatest return on the investment in their localities. It's not an easy thing to do in times like these where government wants to keep taxes low. They need high returns. They need taxpayers. They have to expand their tax base. It's more difficult to identify the incentives that will make sense, and also to identify the companies that they want to invest in, the ones that will really give a nice return on the investment and that won't take their products elsewhere. Next slide, please. The programs that people try to develop in localities. New York State, for one, has what they call empire zones, where if you locate there, you'll get tax incentives. The governor here in New York and the legislature, they empowered companies who locate next to universities. They won't pay taxes for 10 years. So these are big things to try to retain companies. Relocation expenses are very difficult. Very few companies will go to a high-cost, high-tax, high-energy area. And so the amount of money that a locality will could provide for relocation expenses are near and dear, and it's very difficult. So government needs to be able to determine, number one, if you can relocate a company to your area, and then what kind of dollars can you provide, and whether the dollars that you spend will expand the tax base enough to warrant the expenditures of those tax incentives. Very difficult decisions to try to remove politics and government from the economics of business. What we found, there are industrial zones that government sets up. There are, and they call them hub zones, or they try to create manufacturing and intellectual centers where, like in California, does a very good job of the high-tech area of attracting companies. They don't have any problem attracting companies because they have the area identified where these high-tech companies can locate, where there is a cross-pollination of intellectual software and of employees. Those are some of the things, but how do you invest money in those areas, and with the concentration on cutting taxes and cutting budgets? It's a very real deal, so businesses need to be able to prove very clearly why they're worth the investment of taxes and incentives to either relocate them here or retain them in a region. Clearly, there's a bigger return on the investment to retain companies and retain employees than it is to try to relocate. Next slide, please. Well, the government last year, they spent close to $7 trillion in procurement and third-party contractors, and $600 billion spent in the U.S. alone. That's a lot of money. When you consider that the entire federal budget is just about $3 trillion, and the gross national product is about $14 trillion, $7 trillion is an awful lot of money to be spending, and it shows the big effort that that government is trying to invest in keeping businesses here. Manufacturing businesses are coming back from the Pacific Rim, but our competition is China, and they spend as much as they need to attract businesses, and and so it becomes more of a challenge for America as well as the individual states, and each state has a competitive advantage depending upon where they are. Texas is one of the biggest job growth areas in the country. They spend very, very fluidly to attract businesses, and because of their taxing structure and the lack of government regulations, they attract businesses. As I said, California is losing. New York is losing businesses. The high-tax, high-cost areas are losing them to the lower-cost, more productive areas of the country, which is the South and Texas. And that's what it foretells for government is that they need a system in which they can identify which companies are well worth the money to invest, and the officials they don't have that big an ability to understand. The fact is most of these public officials operate from one election cycle to another, and they need to focus their attention, or we need to focus their attention acutely on where companies have the value to return to a locality for the investment of tax dollars. That's a real fine line that government has to operate, and it puts businesses in the driver's seat if they have a product that can create high-paying jobs and being retained in a region. Next slide, please. The planning, there has to be a good way that you can match economic reports, which I prepare for private companies to show the economic impact of a company in terms of job creation, both permanent and temporary, and also the attracting of the workforce to live in an area. And those will differ from one region to the other in terms of the consumer price index and the cost of living. The companies do spend money on third-party studies, and they spend monies on research reports, of which I am very happy about because that's how I make my living. But part of that process has to be a comparative way across the country where businesses and government can rely on a quantification system where they can compare apples and apples as to what a business will bring to a region. And this economic impact rating that we're talking about today can give government officials the verified data by an independent third party which will evaluate the company, evaluate the what a company can bring to a region, and also justify the expending of tax dollars and incentives to attract or retain companies within a particular region. And public officials can use this EIR system in that they can say their decisions were based on an independent evaluation, which removes them from the politics of providing incentives, which is always a problem in a particular region, any region of the country. When politics interferes in economic evaluation, sometimes, we've heard horror stories about what President Obama has invested in California. These companies have not come to fruition. And an economic impact rating system would have forestalled that because it would have given an independent verification of the value of a particular company and the return on that investment of government incentives to a particular region. Next slide, please. I guess I'm finished. So it's my pleasure.
Go ahead.
Excuse me?
I said if you had any parting words before we continue.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, what I did want to say is that having been in this business, both on the government side, where I was commissioner, and I did provide incentives, and I did evaluate companies as to whether they were worthy of the incentives, and that the region would get a good return on investment in terms of workforce and economic activity. This kind of a system would be very, very helpful. And in terms of being someone who does prepare economic impact reports, having a system that would be independent and competitive, and also give good comparisons as to companies on an independent basis, it gives you another tool in which to sell your company. So this is a very interesting concept, and I'm glad to be followed by Anthony Comito, who's the CEO of this Economic Information Exchange Company.
Great. Thank you so much. And our final panelist is the CEO of Economic Information Exchange Company, Anthony Comito. But before we get Anthony on, I want to remind everyone who's attending today that you can enter your question in the console, and at the end of our session, we will address the questions with our panel of experts. So feel free to put some in, and we'll turn it over to Anthony now.
Great. Thank you. Again, my name is Anthony Comito. I'm the founder of Economic Information Exchange Company, and we're the creators of Economic Impact Ratings. So briefly today, what I'm going to cover what is an economic impact rating, what is the process of getting rated, what are some of the benefits that you would see for getting rated, as well as how does all of this tie into buy local, made in the USA, procurement, incentives, some of the things that were covered by both Bill and Martin. So first off, what is an economic impact rating? So a rating tells you the economic impact of a product or service to a given area. And that area can be literally anywhere. So we could be talking the USA, the UK, which I think is still the UK last I checked, Canada. And so it sort of hinges on that idea of made in the USA, made in the UK, made in X country. And it can go from there all the way to hyper-local, like a borough of New York City, Queens, Manhattan, sort of hinging on that idea of made in Brooklyn, for example. And so again, it's a rating that tells you the economic impact of a product or service to a given area. And so then, what's the process for getting rated? So first, it was very important to us that the rating was extremely accurate, very in-depth, But at the same time, we're working with businesses who are doing business and don't have time for downtime. And so the solution we've created offers them a quick, cost-effective, and smooth process with zero downtime, but at the same time offers outside parties the most accurate indication of a product's economic impact that's available today. And so the process at a high level could be thought of in 3 phases. The first phase is a data collection phase where we work with the company to get the necessary data. And this portion is going to depend on the company. Everybody knows each company is different. We've worked with some companies who have a handful of ingredients in their product. We've worked with other companies that have hundreds of diodes and semiconductors and all kinds of things going into their products. And so the data collection phase is going to be dependent on the complexity of the company, the complexity of the product or service, and things like that. But we've been able to get, on average, most companies through this first phase in sometimes a half an hour. We're talking a lunch break. And then the brunt of the work happens in phase 2 and is done by our company. And so phase 2, we're researching, doing analysis, some verification, and this is, again, this is kind of the brunt of the work being done behind the scenes. The third phase, we're issuing the client a report that, among other things, details their rating on our rating system. And so one important thing to note would be that both enrollment in the process and the findings, the report, are both confidential. So, and that's a very important aspect of it. Your report isn't being published in the New York Times. Nobody knows that you're enrolled. It's a private process. And then once it's done, the company can decide what they'd like to do with the information. So, again, it's important to us that we would strike a balance between, again, something that's quick, cost-effective, and a smooth process for companies, as well as offering consumers, government officials, and otherwise the most accurate metrics available today. So you've gone through an assessment, you've got your report, you put your rating on packaging or signage or advertising, or you submitted for a bid or an application for an incentive. What benefits are you going to see? And I don't want to reiterate too much. Martin covered a little bit of it, but on the government side of things, before they write you a check, they want some upfront substantiation of what's going on behind the curtain. And so that's the first value to somebody dealing with the government, is it gets rid of that issue of upfront substantiation. The other thing that some governments will do, unfortunately probably not enough, is some ongoing substantiation. So are you keeping up with what you said you were? And this is a huge problem for both governments and companies. At this point, it's expensive on both sides in time and money. And what we've come up with, again, is a cost-effective process that gives you upfront substantiation, gives you ongoing substantiation as we update our assessment annually, in some cases more often when needed. And maybe even more importantly, it's coming from a third party. It's not self-certified. It's not done by the government. It's a third-party body coming in and giving their opinion. Very important. And so these 3 things really solve some really big problems for both companies and government officials who are trying to keep their jobs, essentially. And it's a really nice win-win for each party. Now, on the consumer side, and Bill touched on this a little bit as well, Consumers are interested in buy local. They're interested in made in USA. What we found is, time and time again in studies, the reason people are buying made in USA or local is to support the economy, jobs, support the community, things like this. 8 out of 10 people answering this, study after study after study. And it's an important issue to them. In the president's last State of the Union speech, he mentioned jobs in the economy about 151 times, I think. Over 80% of his speech covered it. And that wasn't a mistake. There's a lot of research that goes into that. And they found that it's on the top of mind for a lot of American citizens. And that's echoed by Gallup results and things like this. Very important. But it's not just in the U.S. And maybe we can post this study. A recent study out by a global research firm asked, what was the biggest worry of citizens from countries all around the world? And top of mind worry was, again, the economy. And so you'll find this in the UK, in Canada, in Brazil, in Australia, all over the place. People are worried about jobs, the economy, economic growth. And so this is really, point number one of the benefit of using an impact rating is to get to the bottom of why people are buying made in the USA and local. It really hits the nail on the head. And some of the other value from this is that you can, do we have the right slide up? Perfect, thank you. Yep, no, next one. Great, yeah, so we have an interactive QR code that you'll find on our rating, which can go on packaging, signage, advertising. And this will lead the consumer who scans it to a specific landing page for the specific product that offers a whole number of things. You can share on social media. You can share videos, how-to videos, stories about the company. And this really boosts the other aspect of buying local, which is authenticity. On top of that, of course, there's an analytics portion where you can find out who's scanning your products and learn more about who the people are that are looking at your product. And then I guess some closing thoughts. You can go to the next slide here, Stephanie. So again, just to wrap things up, any area can be looked at. It's applicable everywhere, the UK, Canada, Brooklyn, New York, it doesn't matter. And it really conveys the information that people are looking for. They're trying to support their community. They're trying to support the economy around them. And it, again, hits the nail on the head rather than sort of vaguely getting at the point through saying buy local or made in USA. It really gets at the essence of it. Similar to how consumers, if you're organic, they want you to tell them that you're organic. They don't want you to allude to it. Even better, they may want you to get certified organic. And so it's sort of along those lines. But I guess my closing thoughts are, 1, consumers care about impact. 2, governments care about impact. And a lot of companies are leaving money on the table by not effectively communicating their impact to these parties. And economic impact rating is really the most effective and efficient way to get this message across where consumers and government officials are in an easily digestible way. And that's all I have. I'd like to leave some time for Q&A.
Great, thank you. We do have actually a quite a number of questions that have come in. So the first question I have is for Bill. In your numbers, are franchise businesses considered local or chain stores?
It really depends by the franchise, and the control that the local owner has over things like marketing and product procurement. As an example, McDonald's is a hardcore franchise, and McDonald's Corporation controls almost anything that a local franchisee does with their business. Another on the opposite end is Ace Hardware, which is a buying co-op where all of the owner members actually own Do It Best Corporation, and they have a lot of flexibility in their agreement with with Ace Corporation. For example, it does not even have to have Ace on the front door. It can be Bob's Hardware and you're an Ace dealer, or it could be Bob's Ace Hardware. So there's a lot of flexibility there. So it really depends on the franchise agreement, and we usually get into that after the business applies.
Okay, great. Thanks. We have another question, and this is up for grabs for our panelists to comment on. It is from one of our attendees. I have a question on local made in USA. I have a custom cabinetry and woodworking business. I purchase all of my lumber and finish from local companies, and it's manufactured here in Michigan. My plywood comes from mills in Canada and the USA. My hinges and drawer slides are from the USA, Europe, and a few from Asia. The plywood I use for the drawer boxes are made in Russia and other countries around the Baltic Sea. Can I claim made in Michigan or made in USA? I do hand make all of my cabinets and woodworking products.
I'll take this one.
Okay.
So we need a little more information to give you a full answer, but from what you gave us, they have a few tests for Made in USA. Made in Michigan, I don't believe they have any specific guidelines for that. So you could put Made in Michigan on your product, I would assume. Made in USA, they have quite a few guidelines. Getting the wood from Canada, and I think, was there something from Russia too? That
yes.
Causes a few questions. But one test that they put things through is called a test of final transformation, which is quite literally, where kind of the final large transformation of the cabinet you're making is taking place, which most people would argue is in Michigan, in the U.S. Another test that they'll look at is sort of the total cost of your cabinet and what portion of that cost has to do with some of these outsourced parts from Russia and some of the wood from Canada. And so without a little more information, it's tough to say. There is an argument that you could put Made in the USA on there, but there's a couple questions left too. That's the sort of best answer I can give at this point.
Thank you, Anthony. But how about providing the consumer with the impact based on an economic impact rating? They would be able to see that all of those parts and how much each particular part does affect the local, their local purchase, if you will. I'm not sure where this gentleman's products are sold, if they're just in Michigan or around the country, but with an economic impact rating, the consumer could see how much of that is made where and how much of that money goes back into their local community. Is that correct?
Yeah, so, and that's sort of one of the problems that we solve for a lot of people in that situation where they are having a big impact. They're making it here. They're sourcing everything they reasonably can find, either local or from the U.S., but they don't fit the exact definition of Made in USA. They can effectively communicate the underlying thing that matters, the impact of the area, without having to fit into a semi-arbitrary definition of Made in USA versus assembled in the USA versus a few of the other designations they have.
The reality for most government people is where most of the jobs and assembling is some of the higher paying jobs. I mean, you're talking about mill work and wood coming from a mill somewhere. The real manufacturing putting together for a locality would be in Michigan. So that's part of it. Would be where are most of the jobs? Not particular answering whether you could say made in the USA, or certainly you could say assembled in Michigan. But for a government official, where are most of the high-paying jobs are, and that company could have value because they are everything's being assembled and finished in Michigan.
Great, thank you. Our next question is for Martin. What type of businesses can benefit by working with city planners?
Oh, almost any business. Now, is that person talking about consultants working with city planners, or businesses that would work with a city planner to relocate? Those are two different areas.
Yeah, right.
The former consultants work with city planners. Economists. That's where I do a lot of my business. Certainly they outsource planning to planning companies. They do budgeting and work. Planners need budgeters. They're not financial people. But the other thing that's important is that if you have a business and you go to a city planner or a county planner, they'll tell you what in their scope of what they're planning for the region, where your business would fit in. And clearly, the biggest issue that I find is that companies come into an area that's very pristine, environmentally sensitive, and they want to put a manufacturing company there, where you're going to take years and years to get nowhere. But if you sit with a planner, you find out what type of businesses are recommended for that particular area, and you have that business, then it makes life a lot easier to relocate your business or establish a business. So the first step I would do if I had a business that I wanted to establish or come into a region is I would sit down with the local economic development people and say, this is what I have, where can I put it without having too much problems?
Great, thank you. The next question is for Bill. Bill, how does a business apply to get listed on the IWS app?
We have not worked that into it yet, but there actually is a link back to the website that you can find on the app. But it's just easier to do on desktop at this time. But that's something we're definitely keeping in mind for the next upgrade.
Okay, super. And the next question is for Anthony. Anthony, have you done EIR ratings for companies in the food sector?
Yes, actually we have. One of our successful clients, the New England company, Sharon's Granola. We worked with Sharon to give her a rating for the New England area specifically. Her challenge is she's a slightly new company, medium-sized business, and her big challenge was, like everybody else, gaining market share, trying to get consumers to try something new, which is an issue frequently cited by a lot of small businesses. It's difficult to get consumers to try something that they haven't tried before. And so we got her through the process. She got a great rating. She got it on her packaging and signage. And she actually saw quite a few upticks in both visibility. She just got into Whole Foods recently. And then also increases in sales in stores where she was displaying outside material about her economic impact rating. It seemed to really resonate with people here in New England and people at the stores that she was placed in. And then additionally, she's the subject of a couple articles by newspapers in the area specifically detailing that she had a third party come in and do this analysis and verify her impact to the area. So it worked out really well for her. And the food sector is a really great space for something like this. It seems to connect with a lot of shoppers in that area.
Great, thank you. Our next question is for Bill. Bill, how can I get the app so I can find and shop at local businesses?
Again, it's available for both the iPhone and Android phones, and just go to either store and search for Independent We Stand, and you can find it and download it.
Great, and also it's free, which makes it even better. How many stores are on that app right now?
Well, it's actually a hard question to answer because we partnered with Google to come up with the app, and it literally could be millions, but really it depends on what you're looking for. For example, if you're looking for local pizza and you type in pizza into the search engine, it will find all of the independent pizza restaurants that are with it. It'll default to 5-mile radius. If you were to increase that to 50 miles, which is the largest radius, it just pulls in more and more and more. It's extremely powerful, extremely powerful, but it's hard to really tell you how many businesses would actually be pulled in.
Sure, great, thank you. The next question is for Martin. Martin, have you, excuse me, how are cities finding businesses to help? Are they going out and looking for businesses to recruit?
Well, if you're talking about most of the time, a good economic development official will circulate among business organizations, and the businesses that need help will usually reach out to the officials. In particular, Long Island has 100,000 businesses, so to find a business that's in need is a Herculean task, and wouldn't normally happen. But usually, governments they advertise, they have business organizations, they have economic development offices. When someone, if a business needs help, they'll usually pick up the phone and either call one of these business groups, join a business group, join a networking group, and ultimately find their way to the government official, which will be the economic development official, and say, I need help. The proviso is some areas don't have the incentives available to help businesses. On Long Island and in New York State, and most states, quite frankly, there are energy incentives, there are tax incentives, there are low-cost loans. You get grants. New York State has a grant system where the governor funds about $500 million in economic development grants, and it goes through a competitive process. Most, I know Texas has it, New Jersey has it, almost every state has incentives. So if you're a business in need, the first place you should look is your economic development official in your community, whether it be a township or hamlet or the state, and go through that process. But normally businesses who find themselves in need have to be more efficient really need to make the first phone call.
Okay, great, thank you. We have a question for Anthony. Anthony, have you helped manufacturers, specifically, we offer products to the government. Do you have experience in this area?
Good question. And yeah, actually we do. We worked recently with a government contractor, defense contractor, whose major issue was he's in an industry where everybody stamps made in the USA on their stuff. And so he kind of found himself in this sea of made in the USA. And his big thing from going through our process was that he was able to stand out in this from sort of the monotony of all these people yelling made in the USA. And he was able to stand out by saying, look, we've had a third party come in evaluate our impact to the U.S. and really stand out from the rest of these guys who are sort of just stamping Made in the USA on their package on their own.
Great. Thank you. We have another question for you, Anthony. Are you able to provide an economic impact rating for services or just physical products?
Both, actually. We can look at physical products as well as services because the methodology is based in accounting, and everybody uses accounting. Every business uses accounting. It's applicable across a wide range of business types.
Okay, great. Well, we appreciate everyone attending today. We're at the end of our questions for this webinar and appreciate everyone's time for attending. We will be sending out the links to the recording and the slides as well as the question and answers. If you want more information on the economic impact rating, you can visit the website and actually find out more and even request more information as well as request getting a rating done for your product or business. And we appreciate your time and look forward to talking to you in the future. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to our panelists for attending today. We hope this has been a very informational webinar for you, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.